Chairperson, thanks very much, and thanks to the city, the mayor, and all protocol observed. We appreciate having been invited to come and participate here. I can't say that I'm going to be giving fully an African perspective. I think the African continent is quite huge and it's quite diverse. But there will be elements of what I'm going to say that clearly have resonance on what is happening in the continent broadly, particularly the sub-Sahara part of Africa. So my experience is my talk is mostly informed by my experience, which is predominantly South African, and I think, as I said, it's informed by South Africa. I come from an entity. In fact, it's not just an entity, it is a program. When it was conceptualized, it was a program in which the first generation of local government leaders immediately after democracy in South Africa sat down and started to say, how are we going to turn around the country? And if we were to turn around the country successfully, how would we be able to transmit that information, that experience to the oncoming generation? So we established a program called the Cities Network, which was turned into an organization for all intent and purposes into the South African Cities Network, and formally established in the year 2001 too. And those are the objectives for which it was established: promote good governance, do a lot of the analysis, collect information, but I think importantly, share learnings and develop partnerships between various municipalities. There's about 280 municipalities in South Africa, and this entity is made up of the 9 largest municipalities, which are your Johannesburg, Cape Town, Durban, Pretoria, as it is known internationally, the East Rand, Bloemfontein, Pietermaritzburg. I think I've mentioned all 9. Now, you are asking us to talk about sustainable development, and I think at conceptualization of the program called the South African Cities Network, the one thing that we knew we would do is to look at the performance of a municipality using this framework that you see on the board. It's a framework that looks at what is a productive city, which is essentially the economic development aspects of it. Because if a city or a municipality does not develop its economy, that means that you are not going to be able to have jobs. That means that you are not productive. Secondly, the issues around inclusivity. I think, as you know, the apartheid system of development divided people. I think West divided them along racial lines, which means the class divisions became entrenched. So our attempt is to try to foster cities that are very inclusive of the poor, that accommodate the poor, but not just only accommodate them, but actually make them part and parcel of the city, whereas previous to that, they had been excluded. The fourth element through which is the governability, the extent to which we promote democracy, participation, accountability, and the need for all and sundry to be part and parcel of the city. The fourth one is the city development strategy, the long-term development planning of the city, which I think I must say, from a South African perspective, I think most of our municipalities and cities, because they are new, I will safely say that they have planned over a 20-year trajectory between the year 2000 and the year 2020. And we are now, I think, on a period in which there's much more long-term planning, 2050, 2060, depending on which city you are. And the last category of issues is the issue of the sustainable city, which is the topic to which you have asked us to speak to, which for us is not just only about the green agenda. It's also about the brown issues, the sustainability, the longevity of the respective city. And I think that's, it is from this point of view that we come from. I think if you're asking the question, what is Africa saying? And therefore, what is the developing world saying from a climate change point of view? with you. I think we're squarely on the agenda of adaptation, because I think for us, mitigation is not helping. Well, it helps only to a particular extent. It basically means that the effects of climate change will continue if only we do or engage in mitigation strategies. So the developing world, and Africa in particular, is very much suggesting that we must push for climate change adaptation. And I think for us, what climate change adaptation really means is that this is an opportunity for us to change our cities, to make them livable, to make them much more stronger. It actually means starting anew. It means undoing the entirety of what has been done. And I think from a South African perspective, it's about ensuring that there is inclusivity. And I think I will show you one or two maps of the greater Johannesburg region and how we think, because of the past planning regime and processes, it is not efficient. It is not lending itself to productivity. So for us, climate change is about creativity. I think I have insisted on why we are talking about adaptation in the developing world. Firstly, I think the fact that we need change. I think we need sustainability to a greater extent. And I think those are the four regions. Any typical developing or African country would have this type of a typology. That there are city regions, East Africa, for instance, Nairobi, or Johannesburg, or West Africa in Nigeria. You've got city regions, you also have cities, you also have regional services centers, you also have service towns, and you also have small niche towns, predominantly agricultural in focus. Service towns are predominated by a huge public sector service, public sector type of an economy. Regional services center similarly, but with a little bit of globally competitive economy, cities and then city regions. So this is typically how most African municipalities or cities would look like. So they could fall into any of those categories. Now, this is a map that looks to give you a sense of the levels of density in the Gauteng city region. The Gauteng city region is what most people know as the Greater Johannesburg region. And I'm using this map out of many other maps that I could use to indicate to you the extent to which this type of typology is extremely inefficient. Where you see the red spikes, that's where you have a greater level of density. Where you have the green levels or anything that is not red, that's where less density is at. And I think it's inefficient in the sense that they were not, most of our cities were built more as, for instance, your motor cities. There was never an intent to accommodate for someone that walks to work or cycles to work or takes a bus, well, a bus until most recently. So they were built around individuality, and so they are less efficient, and so they contribute a lot to greenhouse emissions. And this is what we're saying is an opportunity for us to change. This type of typology presents the opportunity for us to utilize climate change to change the cities. We have developed an agenda, and just going through quickly, which also speaks to the foresight issues that what you have called the grand challenges. These are our grand challenges. I mean, there's many of them, but I think we think that these 10 are the top priority. And I think for us that are working in the urban space, the second work stream, the work stream that talks to changing the built environment function, particularly because it is dysfunctional, is for us critical, because it will allow us to do at least 3 things. One, we will be able to take a handle on how it is that we make use of land. Because it is a very precious ingredient for city development, and yet we do not have synergized land use management instruments that are in place. I mean, most of them are still despaired. Secondly, it will allow us to deal with public transportation. And then thirdly, it will allow us to deal with human settlement much more better than we have in the past 10 years. So these grand challenges, I think, as they had been mentioned in another presentation, will constitute what we will call our grand challenges. Just the last 3 slides, Chair, on exactly how it is then that we are dealing with these things in the current state of affairs. We are the National Department of Treasury, in line with other sectoral departments. We have conceptualized a response program nationally called the City Support Program, which targets the 21 largest municipalities, in particular in South Africa. And it has in it 4 components. 1, the component of governance. 2, the component of human settlement. 3, the component of public transportation. And 4, the component that looks at climate change and how it is that we can build climate change type of cities of the future. And of course, and I think, as I said at the beginning, the intention or the intended outcomes are about creating sustainable cities. It's about creating productive cities, economically productive cities that are also competitive, livable cities where there is life in the city. And fourthly, developmental cities, cities that drive development, that not respond to development, but are actually at the center or at the core of driving development. And those are the detailed in terms of what better governance means. It's about ensuring that you have the appropriate leadership that manages the stakeholders and drives the sustainable development agenda, amongst others. Climate resilient cities, it's about safer cities, the ones that respond to climate change as it is. Human settlements, the type of settlements that will ensure that you will respond to some of the social challenges, whether it is education, whether it is about human development, and then lastly, the public transportation agenda, as it were. So those are the 4 components of that particular response. And I think, as I said, I mean, this is predominantly South African, but there's clear elements within which the continent can also is also contributing. Thanks very much.
Thank you.